Hello, here is Chapter 3 of the Ballad of Lucy Whipple. Chapter 3, Autumn, 1849, in which Mama tries to make me a mighty hunter, and I finally get hungry enough to shoot. "If you want to eat, Missy, you are going to have to find a way to put food on this table," said Mama, sweeping at my feet with her broom. Lord o' mercy, I thought, fixing Mama with my fiercest glare. Don't I do enough with helping to cook and watch for all those hairy strangers in the bunks in the back tent? Don't I teach Prairie her letters, her numbers, and a little about the history of Massachusetts each morning? Isn't that enough? Not nearly enough, said Mama, as if reading my mind. She snatched Ivanhoe from my hands and tossed it into the soapy water of the laundry tub. With a yelp I fished it out and spread it in the sunshine to dry. I expected it would soon be as good as new except for some wrinkled pages, but I decided I'd better take Mama seriously. "What do you want me to do, Mama?" "Take this shotgun and shoot us some rabbits or a squirrel." "But, Mama, I can't go shooting little animals." I didn't relish the idea of shooting living things. I was much too sensitive, and the powder would make my hands stink. "Don't Mama me. What do you think stew is? And bacon? Meat. From animals. Butte can't hunt, now he has his job with Mr. Scatter, so you will have to do it." Butte was sweeping and stacking at the general store, and had started calling himself the man of the family, until Mama grabbed his nose and said, "No, you ain't the man of this family. There is no man in this family, only a lady and some little children, and that will have to do." Didn't keep him from swaggering and counting his pay in front of me before he gave it to Mama. For all he was just 10, almost 2 years younger than me, Butte sure could lord it up. Couldn't we just buy meat from the store? 1, Mr. Scatter doesn't get much meat. 2, what he does get is too darned expensive. 3, I have a perfectly able daughter with a perfectly good trigger finger. Prairie doesn't do anything but watch the air and pull weeds. She could hunt. Prairie is only 6. It will have to be you. I can't feed 3 hungry boarders and the 5 of us on beans and the bits of salt pork and dried beef Bean Billy Thompson hauls in from Sacramento every few weeks. Now go. Mama shoved the shotgun into my hands and pushed me out the door quick as a cat. My pa had taught me in Butte to shoot back home, but I never took to it, preferring a book any day to the jolt and noise and smell of shooting. Now Pa was dead, and we had come west, and Mama was trying to make a Westerner out of me. The first thing I sat on a stump outside the tent and fretted. The place was so wild, just trees and hills and tents. I could almost see wild Indians coming up the Sacramento River to the Yuba, and up the Yuba to the forks and on to Lucky Diggins, right to where I sat on the stump with the gun in my lap. Near noon I saw a movement in the dry grass. It looked like feathers. Indians. I bolted into the tent. "I had to come back, Mama," I said. "I saw feathers and—" I know, said Mama. "They were wild Indians, and you were in imminent danger of being captured and living the rest of your life on acorns and roasted grasshoppers." But Mama, nothing. That was most likely a wild turkey you let get away," Mama sighed. "Go feed Prairie and Sierra." That night we had no meat for supper. I, in fact, had no supper at all, and wouldn't, so Mama said, until I brought home something to eat. I watched the rest eat their beans and biscuits. "If I were with Graham," I muttered, "I would be eating chicken from Larrabee's farm or store-bought bacon." Mama said nothing. The second day I sat 3 hours on the tree stump with the gun in my lap, imagining myself as the dashing Ivanhoe's secret love, as beautiful as Rowena and as plucky as Rebecca, but much smarter and better read. Suddenly there was a rustling in the grass. "Mama!" I ran for the tent. "There's something out there, something like a grizzly or—" Mama banged the skillet down on the cook stove. "You are the spookiest child. When you were little, wind spooked you. Lantern light blinking in the window spooked you. The clown at Hallelujah Purdy Circus and Hippodramatic Exposition spooked you." She picked up a spoon and waved it at me. "Now you're near grown up, you've gotten worse instead of better. Grizzlies, Indians, won't shoot a gun, want to lie around with your nose in a book. What is to become of you, girl?" Mama plopped a gob of bacon grease into the skillet and shook her head. "Every tub has to learn to stand on its own bottom sometime." I got no supper again, but I must allow that in a curious way I was proud of myself. I might starve to death, but I'd go a New Englander. The third day I ventured off the stump. I watched a blue jay gather buckeyes from a tree overhanging the ravine, followed a lizard as it skittled from sunny spot to sunny spot, made shadow pictures of a fox, a duck, and a swan on the canvas of the tent, and I went to visit Sweetheart, the old mean and ugly mule with one brown and one white ear, who had brought us to Lucky Diggins. Sweetheart lived behind the tent in a shelter Butte and I had made of canvas, draped over a framework of tree branches. Missing Rocky Flat, the barn cats, and Graham's canaries, we tried to love Sweetheart. For the mule's part, she'd as soon bite. And she did. I rubbed the red spot on my arm that would soon turn into a bruise, and returned to the stump. Finally, hungry and afraid to push Mama any further, I closed my eyes, pulled the trigger a few times, and lo and behold, shot a squirrel. It was blasted near to pieces and no good for anyone to eat except a dog or a coyote, but I took it to the tent, dropped it on the table, and laid down on my bed to read Ivanhoe. I plan to rent out your bed, said Mama, to someone who will pay for it. Kindly remove your carcass. At that, I realized Mama's stubborn streak was a mile wider and a good deal deeper than mine. I sat outside the cabin day after day, shooting rabbits and squirrels and any wild creature that moved until I discovered that I didn't mind killing birds as much. So we ate prairie chicken every day, and would, I said, until someone else agreed to do the hunting. Jimmy Whiskers said prairie chicken with biscuits and lard gravy didn't taste bad at all, but the buckshot sure was hard on his gums. Mr. Coogan said nothing, but looked at me as though I were a hog and he a butcher. I had a bad feeling about that man. Dear Gram and Grandpop, more boarders have moved in, but we are far from full and won't be until spring. Amos Frog says some miners are thieves and drunkards, men of bad habits and worse dispositions. Others can be counted as the finest folk on God's green earth. I'm sick of them all. Dirty boots and dirty sheets, loud voices and big appetites. We have to eat supper with them every night. Mr. Coogan near ruins it for me with his scowling and muttering and all-around bad nature. He isn't a miner like Jimmy or a blacksmith like Amos. I don't know what he does or is, except mean. He smacked Perry once for spilling coffee on some papers he had, and Mama didn't even say a word to him. If we didn't have only the boarding house in town, Mama would be even more worried about business than she already is. Her cooking is no worse than it was at home, but her baking is so bad that I have, in desperation, taken it over, except that Mama still makes the bread. She claims I get too dreamy while kneading. Butte and the babies and I are used to Mama's hard, dry bread, but we don't have to pay for it. The boarders haven't complained much, though, even Mr. Coogan, and they eat as if it were fancy cooking sent us by the Vanderbilts in New York. Jimmy Whiskers has built me a shelf next to my bed. He kind of wobbles, but I put on it stacks of my aprons and stockings, a shell from the Massachusetts shore, my copy of Ivanhoe, and an empty herring tub where I plan to keep your letters when they come. Jimmy says writing letters is like tossing words to the wind, for the mail takes 3 months or more to get all the way to Massachusetts, and 3 months or so to get back here, if it doesn't get stolen by outlaws, lost in a landslide, or sunk to the bottom of the sea. He says writing letters is an act of faith. Except for letters, I'm not strong on faith these days. I had faith Pa would always be with me, and he died. I had faith that I'd be safe at home, and here I am stuck in this wilderness. I suspect I'm about out of faith. Love to both from your granddaughter, Lucy Whipple. With the heat of the day and the blazing of the cook stove, the tent stayed hot as the bad place until well after dark. Finally, I got out of bed and went outside in search of a breeze. The sky was full of stars. They looked almost like fireflies, but you can't catch them in your hands. I knew better than even to try. And that's the end of chapter 3.